Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Cars Reading Skills workshop as part of your Jack Westin MCAT podcasts. Jack, it's lovely to be back here for another one of these Cars Reading Skills workshops with you. This is a great passage to talk about today. We're going to be reading through our daily passage called Reflective Art. It's the passage from October 15th. If you're listening to this podcast on October 15th, awesome. You can hop to jackweston.com and you can take a look at this passage ahead of time if you're interested. We'll also include the link to the passage in the description if you'd like to read it. But as always, we'll go through sentence by sentence and really talk about what we should be pulling out of Cars passages of a variety of different topics. So I'm excited to get into this one, reflective art. Jack, we were just talking. This is a good passage and a good author. I'm excited for it.
I don't know if good is the right word for this, but a very representative author, right? Like this is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you
yeah.
see on the actual test. Like Susan Sontag, who wrote this, comes up often in Carr's passages, at least in the practice materials. And
Hmm.
so we can assume that they like certain authors, right, for these passages, and we want to practice with, authors that are very similar or exact, right, with other works. So I wouldn't be surprised if one day this would show up on a Cars passage like 5 years from now, right? Because this is a really good representation of what you're going to see in terms of how it's structured, in terms of the language, in terms of the arguments. So I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Okay, well, let's go ahead and go and hop in. Again, we're going to go through each paragraph and we'll talk about what should be understood from each sentence and each paragraph as a whole. So, as always, we'll start with our very first sentence, paragraph one, and it's pretty short and sweet. It says, "Art produces a great variety of effects in the viewer." So, I mean, I feel like there's not really a ton of ways to simplify this sentence, right? We're talking about the effects of art, right? And we're saying it's varied, right? Like art can impact people in different ways, basically. But pretty short and sweet. Just giving us context for what we're going to get into in this paragraph, probably.
Right. Establishes a lot. We know we're talking about art. We know we're talking about the viewer, right?
Hmm.
And I would say this is an argument because some people may think that, oh, well, art doesn't produce a lot of variety in effect,
Hmm.
right? And I don't exactly know what variety of effects means, but
Hmm.
hopefully they'll expand on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Are we talking emotional? Are we talking about thinking? Like what is an effect? Yeah, they'll probably hopefully expand on it. But good point. Yeah, that does seem like an argument. Okay, next sentence says some art aims directly at arousing the feelings. We see a semicolon. It sounds like this is a one of the effects. So it is about feelings, perhaps, sometimes. And then we see some art appeals to the feelings through the route of intelligence. Okay, so maybe it's directly aimed at feelings. Maybe it's more so intellectual or sort of cerebral. It's another option. To me, I'm just thinking, oh, cool. These are some of the effects. I'm still thinking the author feels this is varied. So we're just kind of expanding on what that variation might look like in the context of art.
Yeah, and if you have a hard time reading this, think about your own like thoughts, like your own interactions with art. Like when you look at art, does it evoke an emotion in you? Does it evoke your intelligence, right?
Mhm.
Like think about it in your own life, but don't bring your life into the passage, right? So I think that way you can stay more connected with what you're reading because I understand how passages like this can be very mundane and boring, especially if you're not like an art major or someone who loves going to museums, right? And so my way of dealing with it is, okay, well, how do I treat art? Do I agree with it? Do I disagree with it? My opinions don't really matter when I'm reading this, but to me, it allows me to stay engaged.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I love that you bring in there's a line, right? It's almost like when you read a Cars passage, you wipe your entire personality completely clean. Like you are just a blank sheet of paper. And as they're bringing in their own points, it's almost like you can welcome certain parts of who you are back into it, as long as those parts of your experience are aligned with theirs. Like don't bring in anything that the author is not in line with. And if you disagree with the author, then keep it in keep it separate, right? Like you should connect with it, but We don't want to be bringing in parts of our own experience that conflict with what they're saying, or else we're going to fall for some traps in our answers. So, yeah, that's super profound because I feel like a lot of us struggle to stay engaged, and that's a great way to do it. Okay, well, let's keep reading. So again, we're hitting at the variety of the effects in the viewer here in paragraph 1 so far. Um, the next sentence says, there is an art that involves, that creates empathy. Okay, so we talked about feelings and intelligence. Now we're talking about empathy and getting involved in the art, probably more variation. It seems like the author's showing that these are all different options for how art can impact the viewer. And then there's another sentence in this paragraph. This is the final. It says, there is art that detaches, that provokes reflection. So to me, this has just been, a wide variety of effects. That I think is what I would pull out from paragraph 1.
This one's a little different. Detaches, like provoking a reflection is not the same thing as an effect, right? But maybe it is. It just sounds that sentence sounds off compared to the rest, right? The rest I can kind of bundle into a variety of effects, but maybe detachment is an effect. That could also be the case. So it was
Mm,
an interesting line that when I read it, I thought, okay, that sounds a little weird, right? But
mm,
but it is difficult to understand exactly where they're going with this. But I'm assuming that they're going to expand on this because it kind of ends in a subtle, not in a subtle, an abrupt way that makes me think, okay, I hope they expand on it.
mm. Yeah. Well, let's see if they do. Let's move into paragraph number 2. It says, great reflective art is not frigid. Okay, so now we see what we're talking about reflective art. So, specifically, the ones that provoke reflection. We're talking about great reflective art, and it's not frigid, right? When I think frigid, I think of like really stiff and cold, sort of, but that's very unclear so far. It's
Yeah.
not frigid. Okay, well, what is it then?
All right.
That's always the question I ask myself.
Getting me very excited here. All
Yeah,
right.
exactly. All right, tell me what it is that I will pay attention to. So it can exalt the spectator. It can present images that appall. It can make him weep. Okay. By spectator, I'm assuming they mean someone who's looking at the art, maybe the viewer. Again, this just a variety of effects? Where are we going with this? Right? What do we mean by it's not frigid? We need to keep reading. The next sentence says, but its emotional power is mediated and is always, to a lesser degree, postponed. Okay, so we've got a contrast word there, right, with our but. So it's not frigid, it can do all these other things, but emotional power is postponed, right? Always postponed and mediated. Okay, I feel like that's an argument, but what does it mean for emotional power to be postponed, right? Hopefully they'll restate it, hopefully they'll clarify, but that to me, of all the sentences so far, jumps out as something that seems more tangible that I could cling to
It
than
doesn't
things.
seem, yeah, sorry to interrupt. It doesn't seem layman. It doesn't like when I'm reading, I'm always thinking, is this obvious to anyone who reads it, or am I reading too deeply? And so
Hmm.
far, every line we've read in this paragraph has been very deep. And
Hmm.
I'm not surprised because, someone like Susan Sontag writes like this. This is just their normal thinking pattern, right? Our job is to find what we believe is common, what we believe anyone can understand. Right. And I don't think that's presented yet. However, reading it to the extent that we are that comprehension is going to help you, right? Because you're not being lost, you're not like you're not completely unaware of what's happening, right? It's just not clear yet. So I'm excited to read
Hmm.
the next couple sentences and see if they do clear it up.
Yes, I hope they do. Our next sentence says reflective art produces distance between the viewer and the world, allowing the viewer to contemplate the world as if he or she were not a part of it. Okay, so I feel like the emotional power being postponed, like, what do you mean by that? I feel like this is a lot more descriptive in that sort of common language that you guys are, or that you were discussing, Jack, right? Like, we're saying it distances you from the world. that is more clear, right? There's this sort of detachment that we're describing now with specifically with reflective art, not just art in general. Reflective art creates this distance between the viewer and the world, and that is more concrete than what we've talked about so far.
Yes, very clear.
Hmm. Okay, last sentence of paragraph 2. In the world of film, the master of the reflective mode is Robert Bresson. Okay, so now we're specifically talking about film, but it seems like we're talking about how this connects with reflective art, right? Bresson uses reflective art in film, basically. So,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. His
And he's
film,
a master too. So,
right,
kind of a positive tone.
right. His films produce some sort of distance between the viewer and the world, right?
Hmm.
Where you can reflect. Okay, cool.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing from paragraph 2. Let's take a look at our third one. The reason that Bresson is not generally ranked according to his merits is that the tradition to which his art belongs, the reflective or contemplative, is not well understood. Okay, so we're saying, the reflective art is not well understood. It almost feels like we're saying that Bresson's not appreciated to the same extent that the author appreciates Bresson, but I I feel like I'm left wanting more in a sentence like this. Um, there's something more going on with Bresson. Something's not clicking for people about Bresson's art is kind of the hint that I'm getting in this sentence.
Yes, I'm definitely getting the sense that he's not appreciated.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I also get the sense that the author does appreciate him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
why else would he say that, or he or she say this, right? And
Yes.
and so, okay.
Yeah. So let's see what the author really thinks. So, particularly in England and America, Bresson's films are often described as cold, remote, over intellectualized, geometrical. Okay, so I feel like geometrical is kind of interesting, but cold and remote and over intellectualized, those things make sense. So we're describing how Bresson's films are viewed, right? And this doesn't necessarily evoke like masterful status in my brain, right? We're saying that he's not well understood. Maybe this is why, right? I don't know. This is just the description that we have about Bresson's films, and it's really the first real concrete description that we've had. I don't know if this is going to be the author's ultimate point, but I feel like this is an argument, right? This is how Bresson's films are perceived and described.
Right? We don't know if everyone in the world, right, or a general consensus is that his Bresson's films are actually cold and remote.
Hmm.
The author is overlaying their opinion onto us, right? To potentially make a bigger point in the future. But at least right now we know that Bresson's films were cold and not seen as like, well, basically they were seen as intellectualized. And I don't know exactly what context that is, but we have to keep reading to see where they're going with this.
Yeah. Okay. But to call a work of art, in parentheses here, or in quotes, cold means nothing more or less than to compare it, often unconsciously, to a work that is, again in quotes here, hot. Okay. This is a weird sentence, right? It seems like the author is calling into question what does it mean to be cold, right? The author's saying that people often describe Bresson's films as cold, and it almost feels like what we're saying is like, but literally, what does that mean? To say something's cold means that something else is hot. And maybe you can't describe hot either, right? Like it seems like the author's kind of picking apart this description of cold and remote and over intellectualized, etc. It's not super concrete yet, but it seems like we're calling into question what that even means to be cold. So I guess we'll keep reading. Are we going to learn what hot is versus cold is? We'll find out. I'm at the edge of my seat. And not all art is or could be hot any more than all persons have the same temperament. So it sounds like art can't really be hot, right? And so how could it be cold? Again, it's kind of abstract the discussion that we're having here, but again, it seems like the author does not necessarily agree with describing these films as cold. Again, I kind of get the sense that we're picking that statement apart and maybe showing it's not how the author feels. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but that's the feelings that I'm getting when I'm reading this.
Right, right. So far, I mean, that's the only thing I really got out of this, right? That Bresson's films are cold.
Hmm. Yeah. The generally accepted notions of the range of temperament in art are provincial. Okay, I feel like this is probably the least concrete sentence of the paragraph so far. Um, so I I think again we're expanding on what it means to be cold and if you can even say what cold is versus hot is. But I'm not really getting much that's concrete in this sentence. The last sentence of this paragraph says one has to understand the aesthetics, that is, find the beauty of such coldness. Okay. This sentence I really feel like helped me, right? Because ultimately, I think the only straightforward argument here is that Bresson's films are cold and they're like too cerebral or too intellectual or too distanced, right? So we're talking a lot about what it means to be cold, but here it says we basically one has to find the beauty in the cold, right? Like we knew the author feels that Bresson is a master. We had some element that he was like misunderstood, and we also know that it seems like the author, again, still is in favor of Bresson. Whether they're cold or not, or whether Bresson is cold or not, there's beauty in the coldness. And you have to see that. One has to understand the aesthetics, find the beauty in the cold. Though I feel like the argument is still the same. Bresson is cold and remote and over intellectualized. But again, I don't think that conflicts with the author's appreciation with Bresson,
Exactly.
basically.
Yeah. It just sounds like the author is trying to create this cloud of, importance around Bresson's films, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just cold, right? There's
Hmm.
something more, but we don't know what that more is, right?
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully they expand on it. It's so interesting how we started off just talking about art and how it affects you viewers, and then somehow we're on to some film producer, right? Bresson's films or director,
Mhm.
whoever this person is, and how his films are cold, right? It's just insane how we went from that to this. And it's just how the author writes, right? They transition, and we have to keep
Mhm.
track of those transitions.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, let's take a look at paragraph 4. It says, and Bresson offers a particularly good case for sketching such an aesthetic because of the way his films take the viewer out of the world. Hmm. Okay. Now we're bringing in something that we had first described in paragraph 2, right? It was part of a more general claim about reflective art. We'd said reflective art creates this distance between the viewer and the world. And again, we tied that with Bresson in paragraph 2. And now it sounds like we're bringing this back, right? Bresson takes you out of the world, right? Or the films do and allow that sort of detachment or that distance. So it feels very much like paragraph 2 here, coming back in with our
Right.
first sentence of 4.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea that there's distance and reflection because of that distance. Okay.
All right. Exploring the possibilities of a reflective as opposed to an emotionally immediate art, Bresson moves from the diagrammatic perfection of insert beautiful French title here that I will accidentally butcher. Jack, do you want to take a stab at it?
Oh man. Let me try. Okay. Les dames du bois de Boulogne. I don't know. Boulogne. I don't know how.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good. Um, nice job, Jack. And I've got another one for you, too. The almost lyrical, almost humanistic warmth of. There you go, Jack.
Oh my God, this one sounds like it's a different world. Condemn morte. I don't know. I don't know. I don't even want to. I've butchered it so much. I'm sure someone French speaking is like laughing. They're both
I
laughing
know.
right now.
We're doing our best.
Yeah.
But ultimately, this sentence is pretty complicated, right? Half of it is in French. It sounds like really all we're doing is reiterating that Bresson's films kind of distance you from the world, right? And it sounds like this is different from something that's emotionally immediate, right? So it's creating distance. It's not like it's not so immediate, right? You're further away from the film or you're further away from the world while you're watching the film. Honestly, I think this is a sentence that you have permission. If you read it slow, just keep reading, right? We'll see
Yes.
if there's anything
Yes.
else.
A lot of what we've read is tied back to the sentences that you always use this word, which I love, concrete.
Hmm.
If this doesn't seem like a concrete sentence, right? It seems like a very wishy-washy sentence that doesn't include a lot of important information.
Yeah.
So while I'm reading, I'm always going concrete or wishy-washy, concrete or wishy-washy. And so like I get more confidence knowing, okay, because of all the different, French language here, it's probably not that concrete. It's probably not that significant or that important. So don't freak out. Don't panic. Just continue reading. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't associate this stuff to what you've already read, right? So
Yeah.
reading this, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this has something to do with the idea that I just read, right? Where
Mm.
where we're talking about how he takes his films or his films are viewed in a way that are out of this world, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And I feel like just as a particular aside, in science, when you see sentences that have giant chunks that look like French but are not French, right? Like big like important scientific buzzwords, things like that, like those are the sentences that you are trained to pay extra attention to in science, where ultimately you are expected to know a lot of buzzwords and you are expected to be able to break down buzzwords you don't know. It's not the same in cars, right? Opposite goal. You're looking for the simpler sentences and you're understanding all the complex stuff in the context of what is simpler. Again, fundamental switch when we go from science into cars. I know a lot of us that are coming from the science sections would really fixate on a sentence like that. Totally reverse your thinking here. These are the sentences that you use other sentences to help you understand. Okay, last sentence here in paragraph 4. He also shows, and this is instructive too, how such art can become too rarefied in his latest film, Procès de Jeanne d'Arc.
That was good.
So more, right? And I feel like it's the same thing as the sentence before. It was a little less concrete. We had the idea in the first sentence that really anchored us to our point from paragraph 2, about how, again, reflective art like Bresson's films create that distance from you and the world, allow that sort of detachment. For me, I'm going to draw an arrow, right? I'm just going to think this is just like paragraph 2. I've got a lot of specific French words, but
Yeah.
no new arguments really in a
Yeah.
paragraph like that.
And also that means that we now have our one of our main ideas, right? This
Hmm.
idea repeats. Anything that repeats from one paragraph to another is considered a main idea because it seems general, it seems important enough that the author repeats it. Okay,
Hmm.
great.
Love it. All right, let's look at paragraph 5. In reflective art, the form of the work of art is present and in an emphatic way. Okay, what does that mean? What is the form of the work of art? It's presented in an emphatic way. If you're comfortable with this language, cool. But even if you are, it's still kind of unclear. Like, what does that mean? Something about the form of art, but that's all I can really understand. I don't know what that means, the form of the art. It's present. Great. But I'm going to have to keep reading to figure out how I'm supposed to interpret a sentence like that.
Yep.
That's one it's not that convoluted, and yet there's not really a lot of value in it.
That makes me want to reread it, right? I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, did I miss something? No. As long as you go, that's why I always recommend go slow and be calm
Mhm.
and stay
Mhm.
focused because this is that kind of sentence that makes you lose focus.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the hard part. You're not practicing for reading comprehension as much as you are for focus. Right?
Mhm.
You're constantly doing passages every day, practicing every day for like 3, 4, 5 months to really get down the mentality that you need to have, which is I need to be completely present, completely focused while I'm reading this. Right. And
Mhm.
these kinds of sentences are designed to trip you up. right? At least that's what the MCAT's trying to do. So don't get fooled by that. Just continue.
Great advice. Okay. The effect of the spectators being aware of the form is to elongate or retard the emotions. Okay. So again, I don't know what you mean by form, but it sounds like there's some sort of emotional impact. Even this is pretty unclear. Okay, so we're talking more about the form, but what do we mean? Right? Keep reading. It's okay. Look for the sentences that are more clear and that are more concrete so that you can figure out what the argument here is. Let's give ourselves another sentence and see if we get a little more clarity. It says, for to the extent that we are aware of the self-consciously artistic in a work of art, we become somewhat detached. And we see a semicolon here. I feel like self-consciously artistic doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but we become somewhat detached. That feels similar to what we had talked about before, that idea of distance and detachment. Again, I paused there at the semicolon. I'm feeling something that feels a little more concrete or at least a little more familiar. But
Right.
maybe I'll finish the sentence and then we can see what we get.
Exactly.
It says our emotions do not respond in the same way as they would in real life. Okay, that to me is like a gift because I've been really out on a limb thinking, should I be understanding this? Should I be understanding this? Here, this sentence I think makes it a little more clear, right? This detachment is kind of associated with differences in our emotional responses. That's kind of what I'm pulling out here.
Yes, exactly. And I think this is the only clear sentence we've read in a while.
Hmm. Yeah, I know.
And so it's an interesting sentence, and it's actually pretty hard to understand, even though, it's easier relative to the other sentences. That we somehow become detached. When we become detached, our emotions do not respond as they would in real life. What
Hmm.
that means is what? Like basically we don't act the same way we would when if it was like connected or attached, right? So like we act differently or feel differently depending on if we're attached or detached. I think that's an important point that we have to kind of expand on and understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Detaching changes your emotional response, right? And again, we should be thinking, when did we talk about detachment? What does this even mean? We know that that's something we tie with reflective art in Bresson's films. That whole idea of like creating that distance and detaching yourself from the world. We've talked about detachment before, right? So it has something to do with changing our emotional responses, but detachment's not coming really out of left field here, right? Like it's something we've mentioned in the passage. So it's also giving us something to kind of grab onto in context to help us understand this new point about emotional responses changing.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Let's finish up our what is this fifth paragraph. It says awareness of form does two things simultaneously. It gives a sensuous pleasure independent of the quote unquote context, and it invites the use of intelligence. Okay, so something about pleasure and intelligence being involved here. Do I know exactly what you mean by this? No. Am I going to worry too much about it? No. Let's see if they expand on it. Um, it says it may be a very low order of reflection, which is invited, as, for instance, by the narrative form, in parentheses here, the interweaving of the four separate stories of D.W. Griffith's Intolerance. Okay, so we've got intolerance. This is italicized. I assume this is a work of writing, especially because we're talking about narrative form. But it seems like it's not giving us a ton that we can work with here.
Right.
Something about reflection at low order. We had our one little piece of our paragraph that made sense, and now we're
Yeah.
going
And
back
we're
into
going back to the abyss, right?
nonsense here.
Yeah.
The
Right.
abyss. I love it.
And this is why Susan Sontag is so admired by Cars students. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
You know,
Admired. Good word.
right. Yeah, so guys, this is okay, right? You found the nugget, right? And don't be fooled or intimidated by all this other random stuff. I do think that the author is sort of kind of having a conversation with herself.
I think so too.
It may be a very low order of reflection. Who cares?
Yeah, what do you even mean?
Right. Yeah. So you just go with it, right? And you don't have to be an expert in this field. And if you are, we need to study your brain. Uh,
Yeah.
but this is not that important, right? Like it's not consequential to our ability to answer the questions. And I think that's the part that we need to just understand and accept, right? And so
Hmm.
I would just continue.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. We're talking about reflection at least. And the last sentence says, but it is reflection nonetheless. It almost feels like this was an aside clarifying how much reflection counts as reflection. Like, we're talking about reflective art, Susan, please. Keep it simple for us. Um, in this fifth paragraph, I think what we're really hitting at again is if you detach, right, using reflective art or Bresson's films or whatever, right, detachment changes your emotional response. That's about it. Um, Really, only one piece of one sentence in paragraph 5 made a lot of sense. So cling to it and have the confidence to keep reading.
Right.
We've got two more paragraphs, both pretty short and sweet. Let's see what we're going to get into. So, paragraph 6 begins reflective art is art, which in effect imposes a certain discipline on the audience, postponing easy gratification. Okay. So there's some element of discipline and delayed gratification. We're not really directly building off anything else that we've said, right? So I'm not really sure if this is going to be important, but we are continuing to characterize reflective art. So at least we're still on our same subject for now. But I'd probably keep reading and see if we're gonna really strengthen this point or if it's kind of a random throwaway sentence. Um, Even boredom can be a permissible means of such discipline. Are we saying that it's okay? It sounds like we're saying it's okay to be bored. Okay. What does this mean?
I mean, I
Um,
think that's a pretty straight. Okay. All right. I mean, I want to continue reading it, but I mean, at least we're talking about something we understand, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Basically, like it's okay to be bored with reflective art is kind of what it seems like we're saying. I need to make sure that that's the point because
Yes.
maybe
Yeah.
that sounds counterintuitive, but
Right.
that's what I would get so far. Um, Giving prominence to what is artifice in the work of art is another means. Huh?
Right. I lost consciousness again.
I lost consciousness.
Right. You had me for a second, right? But then
Yeah.
all of a sudden I'm lost. But that's okay. Again, the concrete sentences are the only ones that matter. And that's the beauty of really hard passages. I love hard passages like this because I know there's only like a couple of sentences that are going to be tested, right? That are concrete.
Yes.
So okay, let's keep reading.
Okay. Distance might create boredom, but boredom can be beneficial to art.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is
I had
this
the
statement?
same immediate thought, like, all right, sounds good.
Right. Okay, so
So,
this is pretty straightforward, right? Boredom can be beneficial to art. And,
mhm.
they said all this mumbo jumbo just to get to this point, and that's all we need to know.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And again, that seems counterintuitive, but if that's what the author says, that's what the author says. Works for me. Okay. This is the first sentence of our final paragraph, paragraph 7. So Bresson, I believe, wishes for distance too. Okay, so Bresson wishes for distance. That doesn't feel super new. That still feels like our idea that we described in paragraph 2. Reflective art creates that distance, and Bresson's film is reflective art, right? That's who we should be thinking of. So Bresson wishes for distance. That just feels like paragraph 2, but we do have the I believe, right? I, in this context, is Susan Sontag. It's the author, right? So it's not a new argument, but again, they're saying very literally, I believe this. So pay attention, right? You already mentioned it's been repeated. It's probably our main idea, but now we've got even more support for that idea. So seems like
Okay.
yeah, seems like finally we've got something to cling to.
Yeah,
Um,
this is definitely the main idea, right?
yeah.
Because now the author also is saying, I believe, right,
Hmm.
that Bresson wants this, that this isn't just my idea, that this is also what Bresson intended to do, right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. But his aim, I would imagine, is not to keep our emotions cool so that intelligence can prevail. So we're saying it's not to cool emotions, or it's not so that intelligence can prevail over emotions. Whenever I hear a sentence like this that's like, but this is not what I mean, I'm like, great. What do you mean though? Because that's what I care the most about, right? Like, what do you mean then? What is important to you? What do you believe?
It,
Um,
I still think the first sentence is something the author believes, but I think the author is trying to make a bigger claim
yes.
about his aim that is not clear yet. And
Hmm.
so we need to just keep reading. But typically what students think is, okay, well, if they use a contrast word, then that negates everything that was said before. It doesn't necessarily negate, it just shifts the gear towards something more important.
Yes.
Right. And so maybe this first sentence isn't that important relative to what is about to show up that is important, right? That
Yeah.
author cares about. Okay.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay, the emotional distance typical of Bresson's films seems to exist for a different reason altogether, because all identification with characters, deeply conceived, is an impertinence, an affront that to the mystery that is the human action and the human heart. Okay. This is interesting. So we're describing why we have distance. There's some element of mystery here, right? Like, don't give away the mystery. I don't know. Something about the distance, and there's some mystery of human behavior or actions or the human heart. I hope that, again, we have one last sentence in this passage. I hope they clarify that, but it sounds like there's some like mysterious quality about humans that we're implying here. I'm excited to see what the last sentence gives us.
Right.
So, last sentence says why people behave the way they do in Bresson's films is unknown. And we see in bracket or in like dashes here, human behavior is a mystery. And that is what the distance in Bresson's films allow us to see. I feel like this sentence is like a gift wrapped, like there's a bow on this, right? Like it's telling us very directly the distance in the films that we've described previously in paragraph 2 is allowing us to see the mystery in human behavior.
That's it. That's exactly. And that sounds like an offshoot of the bigger idea.
Hmm.
Right. The bigger idea is really this idea that Bresson's films produce distance between the
Hmm.
viewer and the world, right? That's definitely the main idea. But the
Yeah.
author is saying, well, when we create that distance, you also get to see this mysterious human behavior, right?
Yes.
Which is I guess, a positive, right, to the author. The author's saying, well, look, this is also what's happening, right? This is a smaller point in the grand scheme of things. The author can't make this point unless the other point is true. The first sentence of this line is true, right? And so yeah, it's just interesting how the author keeps kind of arguing things and then argues on top of an argument, right? This is sort of an add-on. If you're in our program, you know what that means, but it's essentially an argument about an argument.
Hmm.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Well, congratulations, Jack, and all of our listeners. We made it through our first Susan Sontag passage of our podcast.
Uh,
This is definitely a tough read. I feel like it's really good to go through in a context like this. So, to anyone listening who was like, this passage was hard, yeah, the passage is hard. But Jack always says something about really hard passages that gives us encouragement, right? Jack, what do we expect in the questions if we have a really hard passage?
easier. It's not going to be as bad. You know the bigger ideas, right? And that's what matters. It's always an investment. You either invest a lot of time and read the passage carefully, especially for harder ones, and get it really down well, or you're gonna have trouble with the questions, right?
Yeah.
And so you're better off investing your time in the passage, understanding it. Don't skip any of it because then the questions are going to be easier. Or
Yeah.
else, if you read too quickly, if you don't try to process this information, you're going to be stuck on the questions and you're not going to know what's going on. You're going to feel, you're going to feel like 50-50 on most of these answer choices. So I do think that it's a good investment to really try to understand what's going on, especially for a harder passage like this.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And for everyone out there who's like, cool, put me in, coach. I'm ready to do some questions. Again, the passage, if you're listening to this on October 15th, this is today's daily passage on our website. You can navigate to jackweston.com and do the 5 questions associated with it. If you're listening to this later on or at some other point in the week or month or year, we've included the link in the description of this episode, wherever you find it. So you could click on it. We encourage you. There are 5 questions that go along with this passage. Now that you know the arguments from each paragraph and the main idea, which again is about Bresson's films, creating that distance between the viewer and the world, you've got everything that you need to go test your critical thinking skills in those questions. So we encourage you to do so. And if you enjoyed it, come see us in our next Cars Reading Skills workshop. We do these very frequently. So we hope you enjoy them. Have a wonderful rest of your day or week or year, depending on when you're listening. Happy studying, and don't forget to get lots of practice. Bye, everyone.